Offences and penalties under GST. So we have various sections, section 122, subsection 1, subsection 2 and subsection 3, then 123, 124 and 125 deals with offences and its related penalties. So section 122 to 125, 122 to 125 deals with the sections related to offences and the penalties applicable for those offences. First we start with 122 subsection 1. There is a big list of 21 offences. These 21 offences leads to penalty which is 100% of the tax or ITC or refund involved or 10,000 whichever is higher. So tax or ITC or refund 100% or 10,000 whichever is higher will be the penalty. Okay. Now what are those offences? Bio-discredits TFT. These are the offences. Bio-discredits TFT. The 21 offences I have just combined in one keyword called as bio-discredits TFT. So what is this bio-discredits TFT? I have given first B for books of accounts default. What is books of accounts default? Not maintaining books of accounts or maintaining false books of accounts or fake books of accounts, that is an offense. Books of accounts default. I for invoice default. What is invoice default? Making supply without invoice, making supply without invoice or giving invoice and not making supply or giving false invoice, incorrect particulars in the invoice is known as invoice default. B for books of accounts default, I for invoice default, O for obstructing an officer from doing duty. One officer is coming for search or inspection etc. You are not allowing him to do the search. That is obstructing an officer from doing duty. Bio. Then next DIS, DIS, D for dealing in goods liable for confiscation. There are some goods which are liable for confiscation. You are selling those goods or storing these goods. Then it will be called as dealing in goods liable for confiscation. Then I for ISD default. ISD default means you are distributing the credit in excess of what is available. So that is ISD default or not distributing properly. Then yes, DIS. Yes is supply with the GST of another person. You sold goods, you gave invoice, but in that invoice you did not mention your GSTIN, you mentioned someone else GSTIN. So making supply with the GSTIN of some other person. Okay. So these are offences. Bio, DIS, BIO, B for books of accounts default, I for invoice default, S for O for obstructing an officer from doing duty, then DIS, D for dealing in goods liable for confiscation, ISD default and S for supply with GST of some other person. Then credits, C for 2C are there, 2 C's are there. C for collected tax not deposited within 3 months. I collected the tax, I am supposed to collect tax, I collected the tax and I did not pay to the government within 3 months from the due date. Collected an amount as tax and not paid within 3 months. What is the difference? Collected tax not paid within 3 months is, collected tax not paid within 3 months is you are supposed to collect tax, you collected tax but you did not pay. Collected an amount as tax means what you are supposed to collect, you are not supposed to collect. You are making exempted supply, you are not supposed to collect. And you are supposed to collect only 5% but you collected 18%, like that. You are not supposed to collect but collected. That is collected as tax. Whatever you collected is an amount as tax, representing as tax. Collected an amount as tax and not deposited within 3 months. That is an offence. Then that is C. R for registration related default. Registration related default means you are giving wrong details and getting the registration. Or you have to furnish the amendment in registration certificate but you did not give the details of amendment in registration. C or E. E for erroneous refund. You are not supposed to get refund but you got the refund. That is erroneous refund. Then D. Disposal of goods while detention or seizure is operational. The goods are detained or seized but you are going, you are barging, you are taking those goods and you are selling it off. Dealing like disposal of goods while detention or seizure is operational. So that is D. C R E D. I for ITC default. ITC default, CREDIT, T for, tampering material evidence. There is some evidence that you try to tamper. Okay, so that is tampering material evidence. S for suppression of turnover. S for suppression of turnover. That is, you cross the threshold limit, but you are suppressing your turnover and not getting registered. That is suppression of turnover. Bio discredits TFT. T for TDS or TCS default. F for failure to supply information or document. And last T is transportation default. Transportation default means transporting goods without valid documents like invoice, e-way bill. That is default. So these are the offences that leads to penalty under 122 subsection 1. And what is the penalty? Tax or ITC or refund or 10,000, whichever is higher. Okay. Understood or not here? So these offences list you should remember. Write it once. Later on, bio discredits TFT. So what is that offences? If you know that, when you see a question, in that question, if this comes as an offence, then you can easily write the penalty. Okay, bio discredits TFT. Quickly I am repeating: B for books of accounts default, I for invoice default, O for obstructing an officer from doing duty, then D for dealing in goods liable for confiscation, and I for ISD default, S for supplying with GST of another person, then C for collected an amount as tax or collected tax not deposited within 3 months, and R for registration default, E for erroneous refund, then D for disposal of goods while detention or seizure is operational, then I for ITC default, T for tampering material evidence, S for suppression of turnover, then TFT, that is TDS or TCS default, failure to supply information or last transportation default. Okay, so these are the offences that leads to penalty that is given in 122 subsection 1. Now we have 122 subsection 1A newly added, applicable for your May 21 exam onwards. Newly added, what is that? Person who is beneficiary of an invoice default, ITC default or ISD default. Person who is a beneficiary of the default. What is that? Now listen, I am creating 10 fake registrations. And that is not in my name, someone's name. 10 fake registrations I am creating. And from these 10 fake registrations, I ensured that the invoices are raised. And these invoices are reported in GSTR 1 and they filed the return, but GSTR 3B not filed. GSTR 1 filed, GSTR 3B not filed. Based on this, the recipients, based on this, what I am doing, these invoices I am selling. I identified few recipients and I made a deal with them. Recipient number 1, sir, how much credit you need? I need a credit of 50 lakhs. Okay, give me 5 lakhs. I'll give you invoices that contains a tax of 50 lakhs. Give me 5 lakhs. Put 5 lakhs in your pocket and give invoices worth rupees 50 lakhs tax, and the GSTR 1 will be filed in their name, B2B. They will take 50 lakhs as credit and use it for payment of their liability. With 5 lakhs investment they got 45 lakhs as benefit. Okay, 50 lakhs worth of credit. To that extent they are not required to pay GST on outward supply. Now I am the beneficiary. So I enjoyed 5 lakhs. For the sake of 5 lakhs, I just created this way. Now who is the supplier? So the fake registrations in whose name I have done the registrations is invoice default. They are giving invoice without making supply. Invoice default. The recipient who took the credit is ITC default. Both are covered. 122 subsection 1. But I am not covered. See, I took 10 registrations. Now, from 10 different people, I took their Aadhaar cards and I did the registration. Those 10 people will be coming under invoice default. The one who took the credit of 50 lakhs will come under ITC default. But I am escaping. I am the mastermind behind this entire game. Correct or not? So, therefore, I should be penalized. For that, they brought in 122 subsection 1A. So, the person who is beneficiary of invoice default or ITC default or ISD default, now I should pay penalty. How much penalty I should pay? 5 lakhs, the amount that I got benefited. No, I should pay tax evaded or ITC availed or passed on. How much worth of ITC I ensure that I passed on? 50 lakhs. That much I need to pay as penalty. Got it? You understood? Super, na? So supplier will pay 50 lakhs, recipient will pay 50 lakhs, I will pay 50 lakhs. 50, 50, 50, 350s. So government will get money. You understood? Penalty here, this is penalty. So on 3 people the penalty is levied. 122 subsection 1 on supplier and recipient, and on the person who played this game. So on that person also now penalty is there. So government is getting 3 times, not 2 times, 3 times. 3 times. Supplier invoice default 1 time, recipient ITC default 2nd time, 3rd the beneficiary. So 3 times. 350 lakhs they will get in our example. Okay. Then 122 subsection 2. Now so far what we have seen is 122 subsection 1, 1a. Now 122 subsection 2. This 122 subsection 1 is on the taxable person, whereas 122 subsection 2 is on the registered person. So a registered person who is engaged in, non-payment of tax, short payment of tax, wrong availment of ITC, wrong utilization of ITC and erroneous refund. 122 subsection 2 will come whenever we initiate recovery proceedings under 73 or 74. Whenever 73, 74 is initiated, then the penalty will be under 122 subsection 2. Whenever we initiate the recovery proceedings under 73, 74 by issuing a notice, in that case the penalty will be under section 122 subsection 2. And what will be the penalty? It depends. Sir, when 73, 74 applicable, we need to know. So there are totally 5 cases. That is non-payment of GST. Non-payment of GST means what? Non-payment of GST means what? You are required to pay GST but you did not pay. That is non-payment of GST. Short payment of GST. What is short payment of GST means? Short payment of GST means what? You are required to pay GST but you did not pay. Short payment of GST. Wrong availment of ITC. Wrong availment of ITC. What does it mean? You have to avail ITC but you did not take. Sorry, you should not take the credit but you took. That is wrong availment of ITC. Wrong utilization of ITC. You took it wrongly and you used it. Wrong utilization of ITC. Then erroneous refund means you are not supposed to get refund but you got the refund. In these 5 cases, we need to check on account of what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now these 5 cases are there, na? These 5. If it is on account of fraud, collusion, or willful misstatement, or suppression of facts, or contravention of any provision, with an intent to evade. All these with an intent to evade. With an intent to evade means mens rea is present. With an intent to evade. Then in that case, we will have section 74. Recovery is as per section 74. If it is on account of other reasons, other than fraud, Other than fraud. Other than fraud means the intention to evade is not there. Other than fraud, that is no intent to evade. No intent to evade. Okay. Then in that case, the recovery will be under section 73. Got it? The recovery will be under section 73. This 74 is known as malified case, whereas 73 is bona fide case. It's okay, error, it happens. Bona fide allowed, malified is really serious. Now in case of 73, the penalty will be under 122 subsection 2 clause A, that is 10% of the tax or ITC or refund or 10,000 whichever is higher. 10% of tax, 10% of tax or 10% of ITC or 10% of refund or 10,000 whichever is higher. Whereas in case of malified intention, the penalty will be 100% of the tax or ITC or refund or 10,000 rupees whichever is higher, like 122 subsection 1 penalty. Say this. So wherever other than fraud means section 74 comes, 10,000 other than fraud 73, other than fraud 73 comes, okay. Other than fraud section 73 comes, we should take 10,000 or 10% of tax or ITC involved whichever is higher. Whereas wherever section 74 comes, 10,000 or 100% of the tax or ITC involved whichever is higher will be taken. Okay. Sir, there are certain cases where penalty is possible under both 122 subsection 1 and 122 subsection 2 also we have, which will prevail. Sir, 73, 74 when comes, when the notice is given under 73, 74, 122 subsection 2. When only penalty separately they are collecting 122 subsection 1. Okay. Then what's the difference between wrong availment and wrong utilization? Wrong availment means I have taken the credit wrongly, but I did not use it. The balance is there. Wrong utilization, I took the credit wrongly and I used it for payment of taxes. But both are to be recovered. So now when wrong availment is recovered, actually we don't have any cash outflow. Why? Because the balance is there, we will reverse it. Wrong availment, problem is easy. The problem is easy. Nothing will go out of our pocket, no cash outflow. Just already the balance is there, we will reverse. But wrong utilization, cash outflow will arise because already we enjoyed the credit, we used it, set it off. Now we need to pay. Okay. So that is the difference between wrong availment and wrong utilization. Then next, 122 subsection 3 penalty. 122 subsection 3 penalty on whom? Offences where the person is not directly involved in any evasion but may be party to the evasion. What is that? Not directly involved in evasion but party to the evasion, abetting to commit an offence. That is generally those people who supporting artist. So on hero there will be 122 subsection 1 penalty, or in other words on villain we will say that way. On villain 122 subsection 1 penalty or 122 subsection 2 penalty will be there. But next to villain there will be some people na. So left and right. So on them there will be 122 subsection 3 penalty. Okay, you understood what I am telling. So on the talakai, on left and right whomsoever is there, on that 122 subsection 3 penalty. Those who are not directly involved in the offence but attempted, like abetting commission of the offence. And a person to whom summons are issued to appear but he did not appear. So on that person, the penalty under section 122 subsection 3, or a person who is asked to produce the documents but he did not produce the documents. So on them, 3 cases. So one who abetted the commission of the offence. Number 2, who were given summons but he did not appear for the summons. Who were asked to produce the documents but they did not produce the documents. The penalty will be up to 25,000 rupees. Up to 25,000. Up to means what? Even they can levy a lesser penalty also. Then 123 penalty. So 122 section is over. Now 123. Person failed to furnish an information written under 150. Under section 150, there is something called as information written. Whenever department needed some information, they can ask a person who possesses that information to submit the information written. Say for example, tomorrow you qualify chartered accountancy course, and you are working as a chartered accountant to one high net worth individual. Now department is asking you to submit the data related to that client of yours. Are you required to submit? Yes, you are required to submit. When GST department asks, you are required to submit the information. Entirely whatever information that you have, you need to submit. That is the power of information written. And a bank manager can be asked to submit the information written. The bank manager has to submit the information written. So this is known as information written. If suppose you are not submitting the information written, then the penalty will be 100 rupees per day, subject to a maximum of 5,000 rupees. Got it? That is 123 penalty. Then 124 penalty. Any person required to furnish any information or statistics under section 151. Like information, they will ask a person to furnish the statistics data. If that person is not submitting the statistics, then if it is for the first time, the penalty will be up to 10,000. If it is a continuing offense, means repeated offense, then 100 rupees per day, subject to a maximum of 25,000 rupees. So this is 124 penalty. 125 general penalty. There is a consequence. There is non-compliance of a provision or a rule for which no separate penalty is levied. Then there will be a general penalty. For example, you should give HSN details in the invoice, but in the invoice you did not give HSN details. General penalty. You are required to display your GSTIN on the board, on the note, like on the trade name board, etc. You need to give your GSTIN. You need to display, but you did not display. Got it? So like that, whenever you contravene the provisions, any provisions of this act or rules for which there is no separate penalty, then the penalty will be under section 125, general penalty. Got it? General penalty. Then section 126, no penalty for minor offences. Minor offences means those offences where the tax or ITC involved does not exceed 5,000. In that case, no penalty. So section 126 empowers the officer not to levy penalty if that offence is a minor offence. Where it is a minor offence, the tax or ITC does not exceed 5,000 rupees. Or no penalty when there is a mistake which can be easily rectifiable. So in that case also, so penalty may not be levied, because up to 25,000 gives the scope for the officer to levy even 0 rupees as a penalty also. Using that they may levy no penalty. So in case the mistake is easily rectifiable. Okay, and without a fraudulent intent or negligence. Then 127, where proper officer is of the view that a person is liable to pay penalty and the same is not covered under any other proceedings, he may levy penalty alone. So penalty alone can be separately levied after giving a reasonable opportunity of being heard. Only penalty they can levy. 127. 128. Government may by notification waive off, central government on the recommendations of the council may waive off in part or full any penalty under 122, 123 or 125, not 124, or even any late fee for delay in filing returns can be waived off. Then 133, section 133, officer who is engaged, officer under this act willfully discloses any information or information in the return otherwise than in execution of duties. So he discloses some information, sensitive information in the returns is being disclosed, compromised. In that case, penalty will be up to 25,000 or imprisonment of 6 months or both. Okay, these are the various offences for which the penalties will be attracted. Okay, then offences under section 122 subsection 1 we completed. Now, what we need to know is about imprisonment. Imprisonment we need to know. The next area that we need to understand is imprisonment. Say this. Imprisonment, we saw the offences now biodiscredits TFT. These biodiscredits TFT, for this biodiscredits TFT, we should take out ISRDSTT. See, 132 is imprisonment. 132 deals with imprisonment. But whatever is the offences for which imprisonment is applicable, these offences, rather than remembering separately, we can connect it with 122 subsection 1. As per 122 subsection 1, there are some offences, biodiscredits TFT. From that, if you remove ISRDSTT, those are the offences that attracts imprisonment under section 132. First, biodiscredits TFT. From that biodiscredits TFT, we need to take out ISRDSTT. I for invoice default. I for ISD default. S for supply with GST of some other person. IS. Then R for registration default. D for disposal while detention or seizure is operational. D. STT, S for suppression of turnover. 2 T's, last 2 T's will come now, TDS, TCS default and transportation default. This should be taken out. I, S, R, D, STT. I for ISD default, ISD, not ITC, not invoice, ISD. Then, see, ISD is not that serious offense for imprisonment, that's why. ISD default, I. Next, yes. Supply with GST of another person. Next, number 3, R, that is registration default. Registration default. ISRD, disposal while detention or seizure is operational. Yes, suppression of turnover. TT, TDS, TCS default or transportation default. These are the offences that will not attract imprisonment, and remaining offences plus attempt to commit or abetting commission of these offences. Remaining offences plus attempt to commit or abetting commission of these offences attracts imprisonment. Understood? Attracts imprisonment. Clear? So that is this. Attempt to commit or abetting commission. What is attempt to commit or abetting commission means? You tried or you encouraged. That will also lead to offense that leads to imprisonment. Okay, next. Sir, what about collected tax? There are 2 collected tax, collected amount as tax and collected tax. In that, collected tax not paid is okay, but collected amount as tax is so serious, so that attracts imprisonment. In the 2 C's, 1 C will attract imprisonment. Which C? Collected an amount as tax. Collected an amount as tax and not deposited within 3 months attracts imprisonment. That is this note. Okay. Now, sir. Now we know the offences that leads to imprisonment. What is the imprisonment? Listen carefully. Remember this. Tax or ITC or refund. Tax or ITC or refund. Imprisonment. What is that? Remember 1, 2, 5. 1 crore, 2 crores, 5 crores. Greater than 1 crore, greater than 2 crores, greater than 5 crores. Here 1, 3, 5. 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. Is it clear? 125, 135. 125, 135. 125 is crores. 135 is years. Up to. And in all these three cases, there is a minimum of 6 months. Minimum imprisonment of 6 months. Minimum imprisonment of 6 months. In all these three cases, plus fine. Can you remember the imprisonment here? Offences first you remember. Offences first you remember. And then thereafter, amount. Tax or ITC or refund. 1 to 5. 1 crore, 2 crore, 5 crore. 135. 1 year, 3 year, 5 year. 125, 135. 125, 135. 125, 135. Easy. Over. Greater than 1 crore, greater than 2 crore, greater than 5 crore. Here, up to 1 year, up to 3 years, up to 5 years. Minimum 6 months, maximum is that limit. Plus fine. Always. This is the imprisonment for the first time. Subsequent, sir. Subsequent, repeated. He is a senior. He became a senior in doing offense. Always, whatever may be the amount involved, 5 years plus fine. Senior always 5 years plus fine. Okay, see this. So, greater than 1 crore, greater than 2 crore, greater than 5 crore. 125, 135. Subsequent always 5 years plus fine. Suppose if it is books of accounts default, obstructing an officer from doing duty or tampering material evidence. Books of accounts default or obstructing an officer from doing duty or tampering material evidence. These three cases, books of accounts default, obstructing an officer from doing duty, tampering material evidence. So BOT, books of accounts default, obstructing an officer from doing duty, tampering material evidence. In that case, that much seriousness is not there. So whatever may be the amount, up to 6 months or fine or both, first time. Subsequent 5 years, senior always 5 years. This is the imprisonment here. Okay. Then next one, arrest. Arrest, bailable and non-bailable. What we saw first, offences that leads to penalty. Then offences that leads to imprisonment. Now we are discussing offences that leads to arrest. Done. First we saw offences that leads to penalty. Then offences that leads to imprisonment. Then offences that leads to, arrest. What are the offences that leads to arrest? Three offences. IIC. Invoice default, ITC default, collected an amount as tax and not deposited within 3 months. IIC. Invoice default, ITC default, collected an amount as tax and not deposited within 3 months. These three offences leads to arrest. When? If the tax involved in these offences exceeds 2 crores, then only arrest is there. If the amount does not exceed 2 crores, no arrest. So the tax involved in these three offences, tax or ITC involved in these three offences should exceed 2 crores, then only arrest is there. That too, if it does not exceed 5 crores, these offences are non-bailable, bailable and non-cognizable, bailable offences. So if it exceeds 2 but does not exceed 5, bailable, arrest is there but bail will be granted. Bailable offences, bailable. Plus non-cognizable means arresting officer can grant the bail. Whereas these three offences greater than 5 crores, definitely arrest is there, but that is non-bailable. Non-bailable means the arresting officer cannot grant the bail. So he will be taken to the magistrate. He will be produced before the magistrate within 24 hours. That is known as cognizable and non-bailable offences. Can you remember here this one? Very simple. 3 offences here. Invoice default, ITC default, collect an amount as tax not deposited within 3 months. Exceeds 2 crores but does not exceed 5 crores. Non-cognizable plus bailable. Arrest can be made. ACDC can give the bail. Suppose if it exceeds 5 crores, cognizable plus non-bailable, arrest can be made, inform the ground of arrest and produce before the magistrate within 24 hours. All other offences will not lead to arrest and these can be called as non-cognizable plus bailable. But first of all, when arrest itself is not there, then what is the point in calling it as bailable? But in your study meter, it is given that way. That way you remember. All other offences are non-cognizable plus bailable. Okay. With this, offences and penalties is over.